The Wicker Man is wrapped in pagan rituals, eerie music, and one of the most shocking endings in cinema history. Released in 1973, this cult classic has been called the Citizen Kane of horror. Today, we're uncovering 20 weird facts that terrified and confused generations. Number 1. The movie was inspired by a historical engraving. Long before Christopher Lee donned his pagan robes, the Wicker Man's roots were drawn from a haunting 1676 engraving called the Wicker Image, created by artist Aylett Sammes. This chilling picture showing human figures trapped inside a towering wicker effigy appeared in Britannia Antiqua Illustrata, a book about ancient British rituals. Screenwriter Anthony Shaffer later admitted this engraving was his spark. In his own words, he wanted to create a more cerebral horror film, one that unnerved audiences without relying on buckets of blood. When Shaffer zeroed in on the concept of ritual sacrifice, he knew he had found the perfect foundation for something enduringly terrifying.
Oh God! Oh Jesus Christ!
Number 2. There were 25 filming locations. Believe it or not, The Wicker Man was stitched together from 25 different filming locations. Most of the movie was shot in southwest Scotland during the fall of 1972, even though the story takes place in bright, blossoming spring. That meant the crew had to truck in fake trees, complete with blossoms, just to keep the illusion alive. Not everyone loved the setting. Star Britt Ekland infamously dismissed Galloway as the bleakest place on earth, sparking backlash from locals who didn't forget her insult. And while most of the filming stayed in Scotland, the sweeping aerial views of Summer Isle weren't even there at all. Those shots were actually filmed in South Africa, a detail director Robin Hardy later revealed when explaining how they achieved the movie's grand, otherworldly atmosphere. Number 3. Edward Woodward was not the first choice for Sergeant Howie. Edward Woodward might seem inseparable from the role of Sergeant Howie now, but he wasn't the first pick. Director Robin Hardy initially wanted Michael York, but York turned it down. Next in line was David Hemmings, another rising British star of the era, but he too declined. Christopher Lee even tried to rope in his longtime friend, the great Peter Cushing, but scheduling conflicts kept him away. Ironically, the perfect Sergeant Howie had been in plain sight the whole time. Producer Peter Snell and writer Anthony Shaffer had always favored Woodward. Snell pushed hardest, believing Woodward's mixture of moral rigidity and quiet vulnerability would make the character unforgettable. In the end, casting fate worked out, and Woodward's devout, doomed policeman became one of horror cinema's most haunting performances. Edward Woodward's casting may have been a twist of fate, but it wasn't the only gamble that defined this movie. On the next fact, we look at the legendary Christopher Lee, who believed in The Wicker Man so much he starred in it for free and even spent his own money to promote it. Number 4. Christopher Lee starred in the movie for free. For Christopher Lee, The Wicker Man wasn't just another role, it was the role of his lifetime. He later admitted that his turn as Lord Summerisle was his favorite performance of his entire career. But what makes this even more remarkable is that Lee didn't take a single penny for appearing in the film. He worked completely free of charge, as did several other cast members. And Lee didn't stop there. When the studio showed little interest in promoting the film, he dipped into his own pocket and financed a publicity tour himself, traveling across America to champion the movie. Every stop, every event, he paid for it. That personal dedication, paired with his commanding performance, cemented both the film's cult status and his legacy as more than just cinema's most famous Dracula. Number 5. Edward Woodward's reaction to The Wicker Man was real. Sometimes the best acting isn't acting at all. Edward Woodward deliberately avoided the set where the massive Wicker Man effigy was kept, refusing to even glimpse it before filming the final sequence. He wanted his first sight of the structure to match Sergeant Howie's horror and disbelief. So, when the villagers dragged him over the hill and he finally laid eyes on the towering figure, His terrified cries weren't scripted emotion, but genuine shock. Director Robin Hardy confirmed that Woodward even asked mid-scene if they were truly putting him inside the burning structure. Hardy calmly replied, "Yes." That chilling authenticity helped make the finale one of the most unforgettable endings in horror history. Number 6. The Wicker Man was really burned. That unforgettable ending? It wasn't smoke and mirrors. The filmmakers actually set the colossal Wicker Man ablaze, and Edward Woodward was inside it. Though safety precautions were in place, Woodward later admitted he had never been so terrified in his entire 6-decade career. The heat, the smoke, and the knowledge that he was truly inside a burning effigy made the moment feel horrifyingly real. And then came the ultimate indignity. One of the goats caged above him panicked as the flames rose and urinated straight down on him. Director Robin Hardy later recalled the moment with lots of amusement, but for Woodward, it sealed the scene's intensity. No amount of acting could capture that combination of fear and discomfort, which is partly why the finale feels so disturbingly authentic even today. If Edward Woodward's ordeal inside the burning effigy was intense, what happened off-set was just as dramatic. On the next fact, one of the film's most infamous scenes sparked outrage, not from censors, but from a jealous rock star boyfriend who wanted the movie banned altogether. Number 7. Britt Ekland's boyfriend tried to get the film banned. Few scenes in The Wicker Man are as infamous as Willow's naked dance. It took a grueling 13 hours to film, and while Britt Ekland performed the upper half shots, she refused to go fully nude because she was pregnant at the time. A body double was used for everything below the waist. Officially, dancer Lorraine Peters was credited, but director Robin Hardy later claimed he secretly hired a Scottish prostitute to finish the scene after Ekland left set. To make matters even stranger, Ekland's then-boyfriend, rock star Rod Stewart, was furious when he saw the final cut. Outraged at the use of Ekland's nude body, Stewart even tried to get the movie banned outright. It didn't work, of course, but his jealous protest only added to the legend of this already notorious sequence. Number 8. Some deleted scenes were restored for the DVD. Like the effigy itself, The Wicker Man was hacked apart before release. Several sequences filmed for the original cut were removed to shorten its runtime, but decades later, many were pieced back together for the 102-minute director's cut. This version gave cult fans new material to savor. Among the restored gems, Sergeant Howie preaching in church, longer philosophical debates between Howie and the locals, and an extended recital of Lord Summerisle's pagan poem. But the most painful omission for Christopher Lee was an entire scene at Summerisle's castle, where his character delivered a passionate speech about apples and fertility. Lee often called it one of his proudest moments, and he was furious it had been left on the cutting room floor. Luckily, the restored edition finally gave audiences a glimpse of what was lost. Number 9. The original negatives and outtakes were destroyed. The real horror story of The Wicker Man happened after the cameras stopped rolling. Once production wrapped, the film's negatives and reels of outtakes were safely stored in a vault at Shepperton Studios in Surrey. But disaster struck when new management took over and ordered all vault contents destroyed to clear space. Tragically, the negatives had just been returned from the lab and placed inside before the purge. As a result, most of the deleted scenes and alternative takes were obliterated forever. This is why only fragments of lost footage were later restored for the director's cut. The rest is gone for good. To this day, fans and historians lament the vault disaster, with some even saying that the missing reels might still be buried beneath a motorway built on the site. Number 10. It has a crazy, action-packed sequel. As strange as The Wicker Man is, its proposed sequel makes it look downright tame. In 1989, writer Anthony Shaffer penned a 30-page treatment called The Loathsome Lambton Worm. Instead of a slow-burn mystery, this one read like a full-blown fantasy horror roller coaster. It picked up right after the original's fiery ending, with police miraculously rescuing Sergeant Howie. Bent on revenge, Howie sets out to destroy Lord Summerisle and his followers, but not before clashing with druids and battling a fire-breathing dragon. The climax? Howie straps himself to two giant eagles and dives off a cliff, ending his life in a blaze of madness. Though it was never filmed, the script was eventually adapted into an online audio drama, giving fans a taste of the utterly bonkers sequel that might have been. If you're loving these twisted behind-the-scenes secrets of the Wicker Man, hit that like button and drop a comment with the fact that creeped you out the most so far. And don't forget to subscribe. We've still got even darker, stranger stories ahead, and you don't want to miss how this cult classic nearly vanished forever. Number 11. The lost negatives were dumped in a parking lot. If the vault disaster wasn't tragic enough, the fate of the Wicker Man's original negatives only adds insult to injury. After being mishandled at Shepperton Studios, reels of film were mistakenly tossed into a garbage skip. According to long-standing rumors, the negatives were later used as landfill and are now buried under the concrete of either a motorway or a parking lot. That means whole scenes, extended dialogue, atmospheric shots, maybe even alternate endings, are gone forever. Director Robin Hardy and Christopher Lee both spent years searching for the missing reels, hoping they'd resurface, but they never did. To this day, fans speculate about what was lost and whether the remains of cinema history are lying beneath the asphalt somewhere in Surrey. Number 12. Christopher Lee worked for free. Christopher Lee had already cemented his reputation as the king of horror thanks to countless Hammer Dracula films, but the Wicker Man was different. For once, he wasn't playing a monster. He was a charismatic cult leader, sly and seductive. Lee loved the script so much that he agreed to appear in the film without taking a single paycheck. In fact, he often said it was the only role where he truly got to act instead of just glowering behind fangs and a cape. The performance became his personal favorite in a career spanning over 200 films. His dedication didn't just stop at waiving his salary. He also campaigned tirelessly to promote the movie, proving his passion went far beyond financial gain. Number 13. The script was almost a vampire movie. It's hard to imagine The Wicker Man as anything but a chilling tale of pagan sacrifice, but it almost became just another vampire flick. When screenwriter Anthony Shaffer first developed the idea, he titled it The Ritual, envisioning a thoughtful story about ancient beliefs clashing with modern faith. But the studio had other ideas. Seeing the financial success of Hammer Horror, executives pushed for the film to include vampires, hoping to cash in on the trend. Shaffer flatly refused, insisting that paganism and ritual sacrifice would create a more cerebral, disturbing horror than recycled bloodsuckers. That defiance saved the movie from blending into a sea of Dracula knockoffs. Instead, Shaffer's vision gave us one of the most unique and unsettling horror films of the 1970s, a folk horror masterpiece that carved out its own terrifying niche. Shaffer's refusal to give in to vampire cliches kept The Wicker Man unique, but sticking to his vision brought its own challenges. On the next fact, the production faced a brutal reality. While the story was set in the warmth of May Day spring, the cast and crew were actually freezing in the dead chill of autumn Scotland. Number 14. Filming took place in the wrong season. The Wicker Man is drenched in the imagery of May Day, fertility, sunshine, and springtime rebirth. But here's the cruel joke. None of it was filmed in spring. Shooting actually took place in the freezing months of October and November in Scotland. Trees had already shed their leaves, so the crew had to glue fake blossoms onto bare branches to sell the illusion of May. Actors were visibly shivering through their sunny scenes, and extras dressed in thin pagan costumes had to endure bitter winds off the coast. It looks bright and cheerful on screen, but behind the camera, it was miserable. Long nights, freezing mornings, and desperate tricks to hide the cold. Ironically, the film about the heat of pagan ritual was built on a bedrock of damp misery. Number 15. The town refused to burn their Wicker Man. When it came time to burn the film's infamous Wicker Man, the locals of Plockton, the quiet Scottish village where the towering effigy was built, flat out refused. Their fear was simple but real. Setting fire to a 40-foot wooden giant could send flaming debris raining down onto rooftops, igniting their homes. So the filmmakers had to improvise. Multiple wicker structures were built in different sizes, each designed for a different stage of the burning sequence. One for the wide establishing shot, another for the mid-collapse, and smaller versions for detailed close-ups. It meant the climactic sequence wasn't one clean inferno, but a carefully spliced illusion stitched together from several burns. What looks like one horrific, seamless blaze on screen was actually a logistical sequence held together by camera trickery and the stubbornness of a town that didn't want to catch fire. Number 16. Christopher Lee went door to door promoting it. When The Wicker Man was finally released, the studio treated it like an embarrassment, barely advertising it, chopping its runtime, and dumping it as a B feature. Christopher Lee was furious. To him, this wasn't just another horror flick, it was the most important role of his career. So he took matters into his own hands in the most un-Hollywood way imaginable. Lee carried actual film reels under his arm and went door to door across America, knocking on the homes and offices of critics, journalists, and even small festival programmers. He would politely but passionately beg them to screen it, review it, and spread the word. Imagine Dracula himself standing on your doorstep with a movie in hand, asking for a favor. It was desperate, it was unorthodox, but without Lee's grassroots hustle, The Wicker Man might have vanished completely. Christopher Lee's devotion kept the film alive against all odds, but not everyone on set shared his passion. On the next fact, Britt Ekland despised her time in Scotland so much she called it the worst filming experience of her career, and to make matters worse, her voice was secretly dubbed without her consent. Number 17. Britt Ekland hated Scotland, and her voice was dubbed. For Britt Ekland, playing Willow should have been a career highlight, but she absolutely despised the experience. She called the Scottish locations the most miserable place I've ever filmed, complaining about the cold, the bleak weather, and the constant travel to remote sets. But the real sting came later, when she discovered her own performance had been altered without permission. The producers decided her natural Swedish accent didn't fit the character, so they had her entire voice dubbed over by a Scottish actress without even telling her first. Ekland was mortified, feeling stripped of her identity in the film. Ironically, Willow went on to become one of the Wicker Man's most iconic characters, thanks to her surreal seduction scene. But behind the curtain, Ekland's bitterness lingered, making her association with the movie as chilly as the Scottish climate she despised. Number 18. Edward Woodward. Thought it was blasphemous. Before cameras even rolled, star Edward Woodward nearly walked away from The Wicker Man. A devout Christian, he read the script and immediately branded it blasphemous, horrified at the idea of playing a policeman sacrificed in a pagan ritual. The clash of Christianity versus ancient belief systems felt too irreverent for him to stomach. Director Robin Hardy and writer Anthony Shaffer had to persuade him it wasn't exploitation, but rather a serious exploration of faith, morality, and cultural conflict. Woodward eventually agreed, but remained uneasy throughout filming, often questioning the darker symbolism of his scenes. Ironically, his deep discomfort helped fuel the raw conviction of Sergeant Howie, a man clinging desperately to his religion in the face of overwhelming pagan zeal. What Woodward once feared was blasphemy ultimately became the role that defined his career. Number 19. The Wicker Man was cut to play as a B-movie before Don't Look Now. When The Wicker Man was finally released in 1973, the studio didn't see it as a prestige project. In fact, they hacked nearly 30 minutes out of Robin Hardy's cut, stripping away crucial exposition and character moments. The film was then dumped into theaters as the B-movie undercard to Nicholas Roeg's Don't Look Now, a double bill that baffled audiences. What should have been presented as a daring, intelligent folk horror mystery was instead marketed as disposable filler beneath a psychological thriller. Director Robin Hardy and Christopher Lee were furious, with Lee calling the studio's decision an act of criminal folly. Ironically, this dismissive treatment only fueled the movie's eventual cult status, as fans and critics later rediscovered its brilliance. What was once cheap programming became revered as one of the greatest horror films ever made. The studio may have butchered The Wicker Man on release, but the story could have been even more haunting. On this final fact, we uncover an ending so bleak, so unsettling, that it was ultimately scrapped for being too disturbing, a mass sacrifice that would have taken the film's darkness to an entirely new level. Number 20, the original ending was even darker. As chilling as the finale of The Wicker Man is, it could have been even more unsettling. In early drafts of Anthony Shaffer's script, the sacrifice of Sergeant Howie was not the final act. After the towering effigy collapsed in flames, the villagers were meant to march solemnly into the sea, drowning themselves in a mass ritual to appease their gods. It would have been the ultimate depiction of fanatic devotion, an entire community willingly embracing death for their beliefs. However, the studio balked, fearing the imagery was too disturbing and would alienate audiences. The ending was softened to focus solely on Howie's horrific fate, leaving his sacrifice as the climax. Still, the idea of hundreds of islanders disappearing beneath the waves remains a what-if that could have made the film even more nightmarish. And because we love and worship all our subscribers like a pagan ritual, and we want you to subscribe like a cult follower if you didn't do it already, allow me to bribe you with a bonus fact. The Wicker Man was nearly lost forever. It's almost a miracle The Wicker Man survived at all. After its butchered theatrical release, the film was nearly forgotten. For years, only poor quality prints circulated among fans, giving it a kind of underground mystique. Then, in the late 1970s, Roger Corman, the legendary American producer, was sent a near-complete version to consider for U.S. distribution. He made a copy before returning it, and that duplicate became the basis for the longer cuts fans cherish today. Without that stroke of luck, much of the movie's richness would have been lost to history. Christopher Lee later called the search for the complete film the cinematic equivalent of the Holy Grail. The fact that audiences can still experience even fragments of the director's original vision is nothing short of extraordinary. Few films have been hacked apart, buried, lost, and resurrected quite like The Wicker Man. What began as a strange little folk horror experiment became one of the most enduring cult classics of all time, from Christopher Lee working for free to lost negatives rumored to be buried under a motorway. Its story behind the scenes is almost as haunting as the one on screen. But maybe that's why it endures, because mystery clings to it like smoke. So tell us, which fact shocked you the most?
Wow, that was weird.